our group decided to focus on Emily Dickinson as a spiritual guide, and more specifically, how Dickinson invites her audience to follow a religious journey with her. And the first poem that we will be looking at is This World Is Not Conclusion. And it helps to understand this poem if we break it down into 5 distinct sections. The first section of the poem is establishing that something exists beyond the material world. It reads, "This world is not conclusion. A species stands beyond. Invisible is music, but positive is sound." After establishing that there is something more to the physical world, in the second section, Dickinson goes on to discuss how elusive evidence of this world beyond is. It reads, "It beckons, and it baffles. Philosophy don't know, and through the riddle at last, sagacity must go. Even the most knowledgeable scholars and philosophers are unable to find information pertaining to the world beyond." After discussing the existence of the world beyond and the elusiveness of its evidence, Dickinson transitions into a discussion of faith. More specifically, in the third section of the poem, Dickinson discusses the strength of people's faith and their beliefs about the afterlife. It reads, "To guess it puzzles scholars, to gain it men have bore, contempt of generations and crucifixion shown." Building on this notion, the fourth section of the poem considers how unreliable faith is. Moreover, it begs the question if faith is sound justification for our beliefs. The fourth section of the poem reads, "Faith slips and laughs and rallies, blushes if any see, plucks at a twig of evidence and asks a vein the way." In this section, faith follows a vein for direction. To suggest that faith asks a vein for direction is synonymous with saying that it goes whichever way the wind is blowing. This is interesting because we traditionally like to view our faith and beliefs as unflinching. However, in the 2,000 years that the Bible has existed, it has changed numerous times as rationale for popular beliefs at the time. Transitioning from her discussion of faith, Dickinson then moves to a direct criticism of religion in the fifth and final section of the poem, which reads, "Much gesture from the pulpit, that strong hallelujahs roll, narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul." The narcotics referred to in this final line is religion. This is worthy of attention because narcotics numb pain without actually addressing the root of the problem. Subsequently, religion in this instance is being used to numb the fear and pain of death. However, due to its reliance on faith and lacking evidence, it does not actually fix the problem or answer the riddle. Consequently, doubt continues to nag at the soul like a toothache. This poem is part of Emily Dickinson as a spiritual guide because here the speakers struggle with faith and doubt. The speaker intertwines faith and doubt, making the case that while it is impossible to escape doubt, it is especially impossible to escape the lure of faith.
The first poem in this fascicle sheet is "In My Garden Rides a Bird." This is a poem about overcoming faith and doubt. It's not explicitly about religion, but one can argue that it touches on religious questions because it's on the same sheet as this world. The speaker describes the dizzying flight of the hummingbird. Here, the poet and her dog are out and about in the garden when they see a little bird. Its wings move so fast it seems as if it's a tiny windmill. As the speaker watches, the hummingbird never stops except to pause for a little sip of nectar from a rose. That done, he reels up to the remoter atmospheres in the sky. The next part is the part where the dog and the poet look at each other as if to say, "Did you see that? Was a bird really here?" It's the dog, or the best logician, who provides the answer. He points his nose at the rose, which even the poet's clumsy eye can see it's still vibrating. If they question the bird's existence, the quivering row of petals offer an exquisite reply. The speaker discovers evidence of the hummingbird's presence and overcomes doubt. The hummingbird in this case is a reflection of God and is compared to his presence. The next poem in this fascicle is Bliss Then Such Abyss? This is about taking risks in order to discover the bliss associated with spiritual discovery. The main point in this poem, though, is that the speaker does not want to risk spoiling her boot. She doubts her own ability and retreats to safety. The speaker is so doubtful of achieving bliss that she refuses not to run the risk of attaining it, and so instead she decides to live a safe life. But bliss then is just sold once, the patent lost. None buy it anymore. This is referring to how an experience or an opportunity cannot be replaced. So the speaker is comparing the risk of being happy or by committing to something, for example, with the risk of going out walking in your new favorite pair of shoes. Do you go for the walk and risk spoiling your shoes, or do you stay at home where you know the shoes will stay clean and new? The last poem in this sheet is before this world is not conclusion, is after great pain, a formal feeling comes. This is about trauma. The speaker is not experiencing trauma, but rather is an observer who comments on the trauma associated with uncertainty regarding the presence of Jesus. The person described is spiritually at sea in the thralls of doubt. The speaker experiences deep suffering and has doubts about Jesus' presence as a source of spiritual nature.
In the other fascicle sheets of this fascicle, they all touch on a theme of a different aspect of the journey of faith that is described in This World Is Not Conclusion. In fact, fascicle sheet 1, the theme is that if people let themselves settle, they will never really be content. They will always yearn for something more. In the poem, It's Thoughts and Just One Heart, it says, it's thoughts and just two heart and heaven about, at least a counterfeit, we would not have correct, and immortality can be almost not quite content. This shows that even if we achieve immortality, there will still be things that we yearn more, and so that is why it's important to be willing to keep that journey and keep going forward. In fascicle sheet 2, it talks about the desire to keep going despite the pain. In the poem, He Strained My Faith, it says, he strained my faith, did he find it supple? Shook my strong trust, did it then yield? We will come upon issues and we'll come upon things that cause us a trial. But despite that, we want to keep our faith strong and keep going down that journey. In fascicle sheet 3, the theme is why one desires to have a relationship with God. In the poem I Envy Seas Whereon He Rides, it says, that gaze upon his journey, how easy all can see, what is forbidden utterly as heaven unto me. In this poem, the speaker is struggling with God and struggling to find evidence of him in their lives. But despite this struggle, they keep going. And that's part of the journey, is to keep going despite what we don't know and to just keep the journey. In fascicle sheet 5, it says, the theme is recognizing the distance individuals feel from God. In the poem, My Reward for Being was this, it says, when thrones across my hands, with me, miss me, I all unroll thee. Dominions dowerless besides this grace, election vote, the ballots of eternity will show just that. This shows that the speaker in their spiritual journey is willing to unroll things that other people take for granted. They are exploring things beyond just God. They're exploring all of the spiritual. And Dickinson is inviting her audiences to do that. In fascicle sheet 6, the theme is the complexities of music and how there is new music to be found. In the poem Better the Music, it says, better the music for I who heard it. I was used to the birds before. This was different. 'Twas translation of all tunes I knew and more. We may find some music or spiritual aspects of our life, but we should continue to search for more, because there can be things that have even higher transcendence for us. In conclusion, Dickinson refused to diminish the importance of the spiritual journey. We can see in her own life that she kept her spiritual journey and how she felt was right, and she invites her audience in these poems to do the same. Understanding of the spiritual may change. We may change our views and find new truths, but we should never compromise the pursuit of that truth. Dickinson warns her audience that it will be hard and painful, but that it is worth the price. And This Is World Not Conclusion talks about the journey of faith, and through the rest of the poems, Dickinson shows how we can make that journey.